What's going on, guys? Welcome to my channel. Welcome to Ben Bateman Talking Movies, Ben Bateman Media, whatever we want to call it. We don't really have a formal name right now because we're just here to talk about movies. The first video on this channel you guys saw was the Justice League review. It was exciting. Justice League, mixed reviews to this point. The movie I'm going to talk about today does not have mixed reviews. It is universally loved, and it is Iron Man, the very first movie in the MCU. Now, guys, the deal with the MCU was that when it launched, people didn't really know if it was going to be a big deal. Like Kevin Feige at Marvel, he knew it was going to be a big deal. But most of us, the fans who went to see Iron Man, who propelled it to that crazy $100 million opening, which, mind you, at the time was $100 million, we didn't know. We were like, in fact, I don't even know why people went to see this movie when it came out. Because Iron Man at the time was not a character. He wasn't a character people knew about. Like, I'll explain to you guys what I mean. Growing up, comic books were my jam. Favorite thing in the whole world. I have every single Iron Man comic from 1963 to 2005 in my mom's basement. So Iron Man was my jam. He's my favorite character. He's not a good character. He's become a great character since this whole surge of Marvel movies, but he wasn't a good character. He's the Batman of Marvel, right? But while Batman lost his parents, and Batman, you know, has all these like sort of like dark issues, and he's like this brilliant genius, and he's like, Iron Man's kind of the same thing, except like the parent storyline, not really a big part of Iron Man. They kind of wrote it into the MCU. Basically, his deal is that he's an alcoholic. He's a genius, womanizing billionaire philanthropist, similar to Bruce Wayne, but he's actually a womanizer, and he's an alcoholic. Those are like truly his things. So to make him into a great character for a Marvel movie took some work. And let me tell you guys, what they did with this movie was perfect. The first 10 minutes of this movie is flawless. Like, the script is so good. Jon Favreau did what Jon Favreau has tried to do and had tried to do in his career to that point very hard. Inspirations with his work in Swingers and then his directorial debut in Made. You see those things show up, the slickness that he wanted. It's just that he got Tony Stark as his muse. While Shane Black got Tony Stark as his muse for Iron Man 3 and he made a Shane Black movie, Favreau kind of made a Favreau movie. It's just called Iron Man. So the big problems of this movie, I would say, are probably Obadiah Stane as Ironmonger is kind of a bad villain. The Ironmonger is cool. Jeff Bridges is great. He won the Oscar the very next year. But really the thing that makes this movie great is Robert Downey Jr. bringing his movie star charisma and his ability to be that guy to this movie. Like, what I talked about this when we talked about Wonder Woman, or the Justice League, because Wonder Woman really is elevated by the fact that you have like an all-star athlete in the lead role. The same way that Justice League is elevated because you have that same all-star athlete landing now to a team movie. Well, without somebody as good as Robert Downey Jr. doing what he did, this movie wouldn't have worked. And I want to remind all of you, despite the fact that he got nominated for Tropic Thunder that year at the Oscars, 2008 was like the year of Robert Downey Jr.'s real comeback, because he wasn't a big star anymore. His biggest credits prior to this movie, I mean, aside from the stuff in the early 90s like Chaplin, in the previous few years, he had been in 2003, he was in Gothica. That was a hit. 2005, he's in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which people really like. That movie's good. You know, that's a notable movie, but was by no means a hit. And in 2007, he's in Zodiac. Again, a David Fincher movie, so it's a big deal, but not a movie that really people, like, it didn't make $400 million and people talked about it. It was just one of those movies. So he was, at this point in his career, a B-list star for sure. And they saw the opportunity to put Robert Downey Jr., he was a brand name in this movie. You know, they didn't have the ability yet to get these guys. And so Downey Jr. was kind of a gamble. He was the guy they thought they could make him an A-lister. You know, Hemsworth, they plucked out of nowhere. And Norton had been a star, but he wasn't a leading man type of star. He was much more of a character actor at that point in his career. So that's who they got for Hulk, right? Chris Evans was a failed Human Torch who was kind of just a guy in a bunch of movies. That's what they got for, but they figured, you know, if we can base the whole thing around Iron Man, and if we can get Robert Downey Jr., we know he's got the ability. And they gambled on him, and it worked. So really, guys, that's what makes this movie work through and through. And when you trace the whole thing back, the entire MCU, the tone they've now taken for 17 movies, and it's just, there's something so special about this movie. I do also want to give a quick shout out to Gwyneth Paltrow in this movie, because I do remember when this movie came out, which was the same summer, by the way, as Dark Knight. And like, people forget that. They forget how big of a deal the hype behind the Batman movie was. and how completely irrelevant this movie felt compared to it. But now in retrospect, they have had similarly large impacts in their own rights. They've both been, I would say, as big as one another. While Heath Ledger's performance is transcendent and The Dark Knight has become an iconic movie, the largest franchise of the last 10 years is based entirely on this movie. So I don't know that you can really say that one surpassed the other in any way. But I do want to just shout out to Gwyneth Paltrow, because I do remember watching this movie in theaters thinking to myself, oh, Gwyneth Paltrow, she's a little past her prime. This is a good spot for her. She was 35 years old. Like, past her prime. Are you kidding me? Gwyneth Paltrow was in her prime. The only reason it seemed like she was past her prime was because she had won an Oscar 10 years earlier for Shakespeare in Love. So it seemed like her moment had been 10 years earlier. But and by the same standard, because a Marvel movie and an Iron Man movie wasn't a big deal yet. That didn't mean anything to there was no Hollywood currency yet to being the female lead in a Marvel movie. It seemed like, well, okay, it's Gwyneth Paltrow. Not like, oh man, they got Gwyneth Paltrow. Whereas like right now, Thor Ragnarok stars Kate fucking Blanchett. So it's like, you can get anyone you want in these movies now. ScarJo is going to be in this movie, and Kate Blanchett's going to be in this one, and we'll need, Kate Winslet to do this role. I mean, she hasn't been cast or anything, but that's like how the MCU is now. So anyway, guys, those are kind of my quick thoughts on Iron Man. I'm going to be doing this for each and every movie in the MCU, counting through them as I go chronologically through the releases. Next up is Incredible Hulk, which I do remember liking, but I don't know how well it's going to fare 10 years later. Otherwise, guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. This is just a thing I'm doing, so if you guys like hearing me talk about movies, if you're fans of mine from other stuff, tag along, leave your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you want to hear me talk about. Was this short? Was this long? Do you hate my stupid face? Just kidding. Don't say that, but, say nice stuff. Anyway, guys, thanks a lot. Follow me on Twitter, Ben Bateman Media. And as always, thanks for supporting. See you guys next time.